I stood completely frozen in the backyard as my older brother, Julian, strolled casually through the wooden gate, his fingers tightly interlaced with Qley's. Qley was my younger brother Matthew's fiancée. Or rather, she was, until she abruptly canceled their wedding just 3 days ago without a single logical explanation. As I stared at them, my mother smiled warmly, stepping forward to hand them a tall glass of lemonade, acting like this sick, twisted betrayal was a totally normal Sunday afternoon family gathering. The incredibly smug, victorious look plastered across Julian's face made my blood boil instantly, my fists clenching at my sides so hard my knuckles turned a stark white. But Julian didn't know that his arrogant little stunt was about to blow up in his face, exposing a secret so humiliating it would destroy his perfect, privileged life forever. Thank you for being here. Please have a glass of warm water, sit down, and listen to me tell the rest of my story. The smell of charcoal and roasted meat usually brought me a deep sense of comfort. It was the distinct smell of summer, of neighborhood family gatherings, of loud, echoing laughter and clinking beer bottles. But on that specific Sunday afternoon, the thick smoke rising from my parents' rusted grill just made me violently nauseous. The entire backyard went dead silent the exact second Julian and Qley walked in. You could literally hear a pin drop on the concrete patio. My Uncle Samuel, who was mid-sentence telling a loud fishing joke, actually dropped his glass of iced tea. It shattered sharply against the stone floor, the loud crack echoing through the suddenly tense, suffocating air. Julian didn't even flinch at the sound of the breaking glass. He just tightened his possessive grip on Qley's hand and offered the stunned group that signature, million-dollar smile he always used to get out of speeding tickets or trouble at school. Qley, to her credit, at least had the basic decency to look deeply ashamed. She stared hard down at the freshly cut grass, her cheeks flushed a bright, guilty red, her shoulders hunched up near her ears as if she was trying to shrink into nothingness right in front of us. My brother Wyatt, who is a year younger than me and possesses absolutely zero mental filter when he is angry, was the very first person to break the heavy silence. He marched right up to Julian, pointing a heavy, accusing finger directly at his chest. Wyatt's voice shook with raw anger. "What the hell is this, Julian? Are you completely out of your mind? What are you doing here with her?" Julian swatted Wyatt's hand away with a lazy, arrogant flick of his wrist. "Relax, Wyatt. Take a breath. Qley and I are together now. It's a little complicated, sure, but everyone is going to benefit from this eventually. We just wanted to be upfront and honest with the family. No more secrets. Honest?" The word tasted like sour ash in my mouth. I stepped forward, wedging myself firmly between Wyatt and Julian because I knew Wyatt was about 3 seconds away from throwing a very real punch, and I didn't want him catching an assault charge over a piece of garbage like our older brother. "Honest," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. "Matthew is sitting in a pitch-black apartment right now, crying his eyes out because the woman he loves dumped him out of nowhere 3 days ago. And you parade her in here like a shiny new trophy? You were supposed to be his best man." Julian rolled his eyes, a dismissive gesture I had absolutely despised since we were little kids. "Matthew and Qley weren't right for each other, Elijah. You know it, I know it, everyone with eyes knows it." He was stifling her. "I'm actually doing him a massive favor. Now he can find someone on his own level." I felt a violent, blinding surge of anger. I turned my head to look at my mother, Eleanor. I fully expected her to drop the heavy plate of burgers she was holding. I expected her to scream, to immediately kick Julian out of the yard, to demand answers for the youngest son who was currently grieving a lost future. Instead, she set the plate down calmly on the wooden picnic table, wiped her hands on her floral apron, and picked up a large glass pitcher. She poured a fresh glass of lemonade and walked right up to Qley. "Here you go, sweetheart," my mother said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that made my skin crawl. "It's so hot out today. You must be absolutely parched." I stared at my mother, my brain flat out refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. She knew. The realization hit me like a physical, heavy blow to the stomach, knocking the wind right out of me. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't angry. She had known this was happening before they even walked through the gate, and she was already playing the role of the supportive, loving host. My father, Arthur, stood rigidly by the grill, aggressively flipping burgers and refusing to make eye contact with anyone in the yard. He was taking the coward's way out, just like he always did when things got tough. "You knew," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, steady whisper. I looked right into my mother's eyes, searching for a shred of guilt. "You knew he was sleeping with Matthew's fiancée, and you invited us all here for a family barbecue to do what? Celebrate." "Watch your tone with me, Elijah," my mother snapped quickly, her friendly, welcoming facade slipping for just a fraction of a second to reveal the coldness underneath. "Your brother is happy. Qley is happy. We are a family, and we are going to support them through this transition. Matthew will get over it in time. He's a resilient boy." Resilient. That was the exact word she always used to describe the son she had ignored his entire life. I looked back at Julian. He was grinning widely, taking a long sip of a cold beer he had just pulled from the red cooler. He had won again. He had taken the one beautiful, pure thing in Matthew's life, and my parents were handing him a prize for it. The injustice of it burned in my chest, hot and suffocating. But to really understand how we ended up in this sick, twisted reality, to understand why Julian felt so completely entitled to steal another man's future, and why my mother was so willing to hold the door open for him, I need to take you back to where it all started. Because Julian didn't become a monster overnight. He was carefully, meticulously molded into one by the very people who raised us. Growing up in our house meant understanding the unspoken but incredibly rigid hierarchy from a very young age. Julian was firmly at the top, sitting on a comfortable throne made of straight A's, effortless charm, and endless praise. Wyatt, Matthew, and I were essentially the peasants living in his massive shadow. Julian was the firstborn, the undeniable golden child. Whatever he did was declared brilliant. Whatever we did was just okay, or not quite good enough to warrant a celebration. I clearly remember the day Julian got his acceptance letter to a highly prestigious private university. My parents threw a massive, catered party in our backyard. They invited the whole neighborhood, all our extended relatives, and proudly announced to a crowd of 50 people that they were happily emptying their savings to pay his exorbitant tuition. 2 years later, when I got accepted into a very solid, respectable state college, there was no party. Instead, my mother handed me a glossy brochure for student loans at the kitchen table and told me I needed to start looking for a part-time job immediately because the college fund was completely drained. There was nothing left for me, Wyatt, or Matthew. But the lack of money wasn't even the worst part of our childhood. The absolute worst part was how Julian learned to expertly exploit their blatant favoritism. He realized early on that the standard rules simply didn't apply to him, and he actively weaponized that privilege against us, specifically targeting Matthew. Matthew was the youngest of the 4 of us. He was quiet, incredibly sweet, and genuinely kind. He didn't have a mean, competitive bone in his body, which unfortunately made him the perfect, defenseless target for Julian's cruelty. The most glaring, heartbreaking example happened during Matthew's sophomore year of high school. Matthew loved soccer. He breathed the sport. While other kids were sleeping, he trained every single morning at 5 a.m., running grueling drills in the freezing rain and mud. When tryouts finally came, he played his absolute heart out and officially made the varsity team. He came home that afternoon holding that dark blue jersey like it was an Olympic gold medal. His smile lit up the whole house. Wyatt and I were thrilled for him, except Julian. Julian, a senior at the time, hadn't played organized soccer since middle school. But seeing Matthew get all that attention, seeing our parents actually focus on the youngest kid for 5 minutes, bothered him deeply. It ate away at his massive ego. The very next day, Julian confidently walked right into the varsity coach's office. He used his well-practiced charm, his status as the school's star debater, and he flat out lied to a grown adult. He told the coach that Matthew was failing math, which wasn't true at all, and that our parents were officially pulling Matthew off the team to focus on academics. Then, Julian generously offered to take the newly opened spot on the roster, so the team wouldn't be left shorthanded right before the season started. The coach, an older guy who loved Julian's confidence, bought the lie hook, line, and sinker. Matthew was unceremoniously cut the next morning, and Julian was handed his exact jersey. When Matthew found out the truth from a teammate and came home sobbing, demanding to know why his own brother would do something so evil, Julian just shrugged casually from the couch. "I look better in the uniform, kid. Don't be such a sore loser." I was furious. I demanded my parents intervene immediately. I begged my mother to call the coach, expose Julian's malicious lie, and get Matthew his hard-earned spot back. My mother just sighed heavily, slowly stirring milk into her morning coffee. "Elijah, let it go. Please don't start drama. Julian needs strong extracurriculars for his Ivy League applications. Matthew has plenty of time to play sports later. He needs to learn to share and support his older brother." That was the established dynamic. Julian took whatever he wanted. My mother loudly justified it. My father stayed quiet, and Matthew silently suffered. Over the years, Matthew learned to stop fighting back. He learned to keep his head down, quietly save his meager salary from his grueling after-school jobs, and expect absolutely nothing from the people who were supposed to protect him. We were all adults trying to navigate our own lives. Julian was working a high-stress job in corporate finance, loudly bragging at every single Thanksgiving dinner about his latest promotion, his massive bonuses, and his rotating fleet of luxury car leases. Wyatt was working tough hours in commercial construction. I was a mid-level IT manager, and Matthew was finally thriving. He had pushed through the childhood trauma and become a highly talented landscape architect. He built a very quiet, peaceful, independent life for himself. And then he met Qley. Qley was a total breath of fresh air for our family. She was vibrant, highly intelligent, and fiercely loyal to the people she cared about. She also happened to come from a very wealthy family. Her father, Mr. Harrison, was a highly successful, well-connected real estate developer in the city, but you would never know it just by looking at her. She didn't care about flaunting designer bags or eating at ridiculously fancy restaurants. She cared about Matthew. She saw the gentle, creative, incredibly caring soul that the rest of our family had constantly overlooked and dismissed. For the very first time in his entire life, Matthew was the absolute center of someone's universe. He smiled more. He stood taller, his posture completely changing. When he finally brought Qley to one of our chaotic Sunday dinners, the whole energy of the room shifted. Even the intimidating Mr. Harrison absolutely adored Matthew. He often told my father over golf that he couldn't have handpicked a better, more honest man to take care of his only daughter. Matthew was relentlessly working overtime, saving every single spare penny of his salary for over a year to buy Qley the perfect, flawless engagement ring she deserved. But I caught the dark, calculating looks Julian gave them from across the room. While the rest of us were genuinely, incredibly happy for the youngest brother, Julian would sit silently at the end of the long dining table, slowly swirling his expensive wine glass. His eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. Whenever Qley casually mentioned her family's upcoming vacations, her father's massive business deals, or her future inheritance, Julian's ears would visibly perk up. He would subtly inject himself into their conversations, asking highly invasive, specific questions about Mr. Harrison's financial portfolio, all carefully disguised as polite, friendly conversation. "So, Qley," Julian asked one evening, leaning casually against the granite kitchen counter with a charming smile, "your dad owns all those major commercial properties downtown, right? That must be a massive, incredibly complex operation to inherit one day. Do you have a financial advisor helping you navigate that?" Qley smiled politely, completely unaware of the predator in the room. "It's a lot of work, yes, but Matthew and I are really just focused on building our own quiet life together right now. Dad's business is his business. We want to make our own way." Julian's jaw tightened slightly, a small muscle ticking in his cheek, though he expertly kept his fake smile plastered on his face. He absolutely hated that Matthew, the quiet, overlooked, supposedly weak little brother, was marrying directly into massive money and undeniable power, while he was secretly drowning in the intense stress of keeping up his fake, wealthy corporate image. I saw the pure envy radiating off Julian, toxic, bitter, and thick, but I naively brushed it off. I thought Julian was just being his usual arrogant, competitive self. I never in a million years imagined he was actively plotting in the shadows to completely destroy them. 6 months before the scheduled wedding, everything seemed absolutely perfect. The beautiful, expensive venue was fully booked, the dresses were bought, the catering menu was finalized, and Matthew was the happiest I had ever seen him in his entire life. Then, a random Tuesday night completely shattered his world into a million jagged pieces. It was pouring rain outside, a heavy, relentless storm. I was sitting alone in my living room, peacefully watching a late-night basketball game, when someone started frantically, violently pounding on my front door. It sounded like the police. I rushed to open it and found Matthew standing on my porch, soaked to the absolute bone. He didn't have an umbrella. He wasn't even wearing a jacket. He was just standing there in a soaked t-shirt, shivering violently from the cold, holding his glowing cell phone in a white-knuckled death grip. Matthew? Oh my God, what's wrong? I pulled him quickly inside, shutting the door against the howling wind. He couldn't even speak. His chest heaved up and down as he gasped desperately for air, his eyes wide, red, and completely vacant. He shoved his wet phone aggressively into my hands. His hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the expensive device on the floor. I looked down at the bright screen. It was a long text message from Qley. It was cold, brutally clinical, and completely out of character for the warm woman I knew. Matthew, I'm so sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I'm officially canceling the wedding. Please don't try to contact me. I need total space. I'm packing my things and leaving the apartment tonight. Goodbye. What happened? I asked, my voice laced with rising panic. Did you guys get into a massive fight? What did you do? Nothing, Matthew finally choked out, his voice cracking horribly as he completely broke down in my hallway. He collapsed heavily onto my living room couch, burying his wet face deep into his hands. A raw, guttural, agonizing sob tore forcefully from his throat. I came home from a long shift at work, and all her stuff was just gone. Her clothes, her pictures, her toothbrush. Her engagement ring was just sitting on the cold kitchen counter next to the keys. She won't answer any of my calls. Her dad won't answer my texts. She just completely erased me, Elijah. Why? What did I do wrong? I gave her everything. I sat closely beside him for hours, rubbing his back, trying desperately to piece together a massive puzzle that seemingly had no edges. Long-term, healthy relationships don't just end like that. People don't pack up their entire lives in 3 hours over a minor, everyday disagreement. Something completely catastrophic had happened, but Matthew was left completely in the dark, bleeding out emotionally. He immediately blamed himself. He analyzed every single minor conversation they had over the last month, looking frantically for hidden clues, looking for a reason he wasn't good enough, rich enough, or smart enough for her. I painfully watched my strong brother wither away into a ghost over the next 3 agonizing days. He completely refused to eat. He barely slept for more than 20 minutes at a time. He just sat on my couch and stared blankly at the wall, a hollow, empty shell of the vibrant man he was supposed to be. I desperately wanted to help him, to fix it, but I had absolutely no answers to give him. The dark truth was hiding quietly in the shadows, patiently waiting for the absolute perfect moment to strike and inflict maximum pain. On early Friday morning, while Matthew was finally dozing fitfully on my couch, my cell phone rang. It was my mother. When I answered, her voice was disturbingly bright and cheerful, completely ignoring the massive tragedy that had just ripped mercilessly through our family. Elijah, good morning. Listen, I'm doing a big family barbecue this Sunday. I want you and Wyatt there at 2 p.m. sharp. I'm making my famous potato salad and getting the good steaks from the butcher. I squeezed the bridge of my nose tightly, fighting off a sudden, pounding headache. Mom, Are you actually serious right now? Matthew's entire life just fell apart a few days ago. He's practically catatonic on my couch right now. Nobody is in the mood for hot dogs, potato salad, and family small talk. We need to be figuring out what the hell happened with Qley. Oh, please, Matthew will be perfectly fine, she dismissed casually, the chilling lack of empathy in her tone making my stomach churn with disgust. He just needs a little time to process it. But family is important, Elijah. We need to gather and show support for each other. Besides, Julian has some very exciting, wonderful news he wants to share with everyone. Exciting news? Right now. I snapped, my patience instantly vaporizing. Can Julian's massive ego take a back seat for 5 damn minutes while his little brother grieves the loss of his future wife? Just be there, Elijah, she said, her voice dropping instantly into that strict, cold, authoritative tone she always used to shut down arguments when we were kids. Don't you dare ruin this weekend for the family. And she abruptly hung up the phone. I called Wyatt immediately and put him on speaker. Wyatt was furious. I swear to God, Elijah, if Julian shows up to this barbecue in a brand new sports car bragging about a corporate bonus while Matthew is practically suicidal in your living room, I'm going to physically throw him into the burning grill. Just keep it together, please. I warned him, though I honestly felt the exact same violent urge. We eat the food, we leave in an hour. We don't cause a massive scene for Mom's sake. We just get through it. When Wyatt and I pulled up to our parents' house that Sunday afternoon, the driveway was packed with cars. We walked slowly through the wooden side gate, hearing the loud chatter and smelling the thick charcoal smoke. Everything felt so brutally, sickeningly normal. It felt like a massive betrayal to Matthew just being there holding a red Solo cup. Wyatt was nervously pacing near the fence, muttering dark curses under his breath, stating loudly that this sunny dinner felt exactly like a funeral. And then, the heavy wooden gate creaked open again. Julian confidently walked in, and he wasn't alone. He was tightly holding Qley's hand. That was the exact moment the world stopped spinning. That was the moment my mother smiled and handed them the cold lemonade. And that was the sickening moment I realized my family wasn't just highly dysfunctional. It was deeply toxic, incredibly manipulative, and fundamentally cruel. Everyone will benefit from this, Julian had said, standing arrogantly on the patio with his arm draped possessively, intimately around Qley's waist for the entire family to see. Wyatt completely lost his mind. He lunged forward like a coiled spring, grabbing Julian violently by the collar of his expensive polo shirt, shoving him incredibly hard against the brick wall of the house. You absolute piece of trash, Wyatt roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of red with pure, unfiltered fury. You stole her. You sick, twisted psychopath. You stole your own brother's fiancée. Julian didn't even drop his cold beer. He just looked down at Wyatt's hands with an expression of bored, mild irritation. Get your hands off my shirt, Wyatt, before I call the cops and have you arrested for assault. You're ruining a $200 shirt. Wyatt, stop it right now. My father finally spoke up, rushing over in a panic to physically pry Wyatt's shaking hands off Julian's chest. Not in front of the neighbors, for God's sake. Let him go. Are you actually defending him? Wyatt yelled, turning his intense wrath entirely on our dad. Look at what he did. He's standing right here, holding hands with Matthew's girl, and you're worried about the neighbors. It's not like that, Qley finally whispered, her voice trembling terribly. She looked absolutely terrified, hiding slightly behind Julian's broad shoulder. Matthew and we just weren't working out. Julian helped me see that clearly. He was there for me when I needed someone to talk to. He was there for you? I laughed, a harsh, incredibly bitter sound that echoed in the quiet yard. He's Matthew's brother. He was supposed to be standing next to him at the altar holding the rings, not crawling into your bed behind his back. That is enough. My mother's voice cut through the shouting like a sharp whip. She marched over, her face set in absolute stone. She didn't look at Julian with an ounce of disappointment. She looked at Wyatt and me with pure, unadulterated disdain. Your brother is a grown adult. Qley is an adult. They made a connection. It happens in life. You will not disrespect them in my home. You are completely out of your mind, I told my mother, stepping away from her like she was physically radioactive. You are actually standing there, defending him. You knew all about this. You planned this little sick reveal party. I did exactly what a good mother is supposed to do, Eleanor replied coldly, lifting her chin. I supported my eldest son's happiness. Now, sit down, eat your food, or leave my property. Wyatt spat aggressively on the green grass right near Julian's expensive shoes. You make me sick, all of you. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the yard, slamming the heavy wooden gate so hard the hinges actually cracked. I looked at Julian one last time before following Wyatt. Julian gave me a tiny, imperceptible smirk. He had marked his territory. He had asserted his total dominance over the family once again. I didn't say another word. I turned my back on my parents, on my older brother, and walked away, my mind spinning with a rage so intense and consuming it legitimately scared me. 3 agonizing days later, my mother, in her infinite, baffling delusion, decided that what this fractured family really needed was a formal, sit-down dinner to clear the air and move forward. She relentlessly texted and called Wyatt and me, going as far as threatening to show up at our corporate workplaces and cause a scene if we didn't attend. We reluctantly agreed to go, not to reconcile or forgive, but because we desperately needed concrete answers. We needed to know exactly how Julian pulled this massive betrayal off without anyone noticing. The large dining room table was set perfectly, like a magazine cover. Fine china, crystal water glasses, a massive roasted chicken in the center. It looked like a festive holiday, which made the suffocating atmosphere even more nauseating. Julian sat proudly at the head of the table next to my father, wearing a crisp, tailored button-down shirt, looking completely relaxed and unbothered. Qley sat quietly next to him, staring intensely at her plate of mashed potatoes, refusing to make eye contact with anyone in the room. Let's just have a peaceful, loving meal, my mother announced loudly, pouring red wine into glasses as if everything in the world was perfectly fine. No, I said instantly, pushing my empty porcelain plate roughly away from me. The screech of the plate against the polished wood was piercingly loud. I locked my eyes directly with Julian's. I want to hear it right now from you. How exactly did this happen? How do you go from picking out matching tuxedos with Matthew to stealing the very woman he was going to marry? Julian sighed heavily, swirling his expensive wine like a bored aristocrat. You're being incredibly dramatic, Elijah. I didn't steal anyone. Qley is a human being with free will. We started talking a few months ago. Completely innocent conversations at first. She was highly stressed about the wedding planning. I offered a friendly, listening ear. We quickly realized we had a lot more in common intellectually than she and Matthew ever did. She felt trapped in a boring life. I just gave her an out. You gave her an out? Wyatt sneered loudly from across the long table. You manipulated her. You saw something beautiful that Matthew loved, and your massive ego couldn't handle it. Just like the soccer team, just like his first car. You're a parasite, Julian. Matthew is weak, Julian snapped harshly, his perfectly calm facade finally cracking under the pressure. He leaned forward, his eyes flashing with genuine, ugly malice. He's weak, he's incredibly boring, and he has absolutely no ambition in life. Qley deserves a real man who can actually provide for her, a man with a real corporate future, not a guy who digs in the dirt and plants bushes for a living. I saved her from a painfully mediocre life. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of his words hung heavily in the dead air. I looked over at Qley. I fully expected her to defend Matthew. I expected her to say she loved Matthew once but just fell out of love naturally. Instead, her lower lip started to tremble. She started to cry. Silent, heavy tears dropped rapidly from her face onto her lap. Is that what he told you? I asked Qley, keeping my voice surprisingly soft but intense. Did he repeatedly tell you Matthew was weak? Qley nodded slowly, her voice barely a broken whisper. He told me things. For months. Every single time Matthew was working late shifts, Julian would call my phone. He said Matthew was constantly complaining behind my back about the wedding costs. He said Matthew only proposed to me because he felt financially pressured by my father. He told me Matthew was secretly looking for a lawyer to draft a brutal prenup because he didn't trust me. The dining room went dead silent. Even my father, who was cowardly pretending to focus on his food, completely stopped chewing. What? Wyatt demanded loudly, leaning his entire upper body closer to Qley. Say that again. Right now. Qley wiped her eyes frantically, her dark mascara running down her flushed cheeks. The immense, crushing guilt was finally breaking her silence. Julian told me Matthew didn't really love me at all. He said Matthew was just settling for financial security. My friend Sarah. She backed him up. Sarah told me she heard Matthew talking to his friends at a bar about deeply regretting the entire engagement. Julian was always there to comfort me when I cried. He made me feel valued when he fully convinced me Matthew didn't care about me. I felt my blood turn to absolute ice in my veins. This wasn't just a sudden, unexpected romance. It wasn't a mistake of passion. It was a highly calculated, months-long psychological assassination. Julian had spent countless hours methodically poisoning Qley's mind. He expertly used her deepest insecurities against her. He even recruited her own best friend to corroborate his vicious lies. He slowly built a massive cage of doubt and fear around her, and then perfectly presented himself as the only safe escape route. You lied to her? I said, my voice shaking as I stared at Julian with pure, unadulterated disgust. Matthew worked 60 brutal hours a week to buy that diamond ring. He loved her more than anything in this entire world, and you systematically, deliberately convinced her he didn't care just so you could take her. Julian didn't look an ounce ashamed. He actually looked highly annoyed that his brilliant strategy was being laid out bare in the open. It doesn't matter how it happened, he said coldly, taking another sip of wine. What matters is the end result. She's with me now. We are a vastly better fit. She belongs in my world. Your world? Wyatt laughed, a loud, bitter, mocking sound. What world is that exactly, Julian? The world of endless lies, deceit, and backstabbing your own blood. Enough! My mother violently slammed her open hand down on the table. The silverware rattled loudly against the plates. She looked absolutely furious, but not at the son who had just confessed to psychological manipulation. She glared murderously at Wyatt and me. Stop attacking your older brother right now. Qley made her own choice. Relationships are incredibly complicated. Sometimes people realize they made a massive mistake before the wedding day. It is an absolute blessing they figured it out now rather than going through a messy, expensive divorce later. Julian stepped up like a man. You both should be happy for them. I stared at the woman sitting confidently at the head of the table. I saw the absolute, terrifying delusion deep in her eyes. She would much rather watch one of her sons be completely destroyed than admit for even a second that her golden child was a manipulative monster. A blessing? I repeated slowly, the specific word tasting like literal poison on my tongue. I stood up quickly from the table. My wooden chair scraped so loudly against the hardwood floor it sounded like a scream. You are sick. Both of you are deeply, fundamentally sick. You sit here eating dinner and loudly justify emotional abuse and manipulation just because it keeps your perfect, flawless image of Julian totally intact. Sit down, Elijah, my father ordered sharply, finally finding his voice for the very first time all evening. Do not speak to your mother that way in this house. No, I said firmly, looking down at my father with utter contempt. You do not get to play the tough dad role now. You sat there silently for 30 years and watched her enable him, and you did absolutely nothing to stop it. You are just as guilty as she is. I turned my intense attention back to Julian, who was casually picking at his roasted chicken with a fork, pretending he wasn't bothered by the yelling. You listen to me very carefully, Julian. You think you won this game. You think you took the grand prize and you get to walk away totally clean. But I am going to tell Matthew exactly what you did. I am going to tell him how you spent months lying to his fiancée. And I promise you, I will not let you live peacefully with this. I will make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." Julian chuckled, a dry, deeply arrogant sound that grated on my nerves. "Go ahead. Tell him. Run to little Matthew. What's he going to do? Cry into his pillow? He's a loser, Elijah. And you're just mad because you're a loser too, stuck defending the weakest link." "We're completely done," Wyatt said, standing up right next to me. He didn't yell this time. His voice was frighteningly, terrifyingly calm. "We are officially done with this family. Don't call us for Thanksgiving. Don't call us for Christmas. Don't call us if someone dies. If you ever come near me or Matthew again, Julian, I will put you in the hospital." We turned our backs and walked straight out of the dining room. My mother shouted frantically after us, demanding we come back to the table, telling us we were foolishly tearing the family apart over a silly, temporary misunderstanding. We didn't stop walking. We walked out the front door and out into the cool, refreshing night air. The heavy oak door slammed shut loudly behind us, permanently severing the very last tie I had to my toxic parents. As I walked to the car, I felt a strange, overwhelming mix of profound grief for the family I never really had, and sudden, absolute clarity. The war had officially begun, and I was going to finish it. The dark drive to Matthew's apartment was the longest, most agonizing 30 minutes of my entire life. Wyatt drove, his large hands gripping the leather steering, while so hard his knuckles were stark white in the streetlights. Neither of us spoke a single word. We were both absolutely terrified of how Matthew would react to the news. Being unexpectedly dumped is one massive trauma. Finding out your own flesh and blood deliberately orchestrated the entire betrayal through calculated, malicious lies is a whole different level of trauma that breaks people permanently. We knocked on his apartment door. Took him a very long time to answer. When he finally opened the heavy door, he looked exactly like a ghost. He had visibly lost weight in just a single week. His cheekbones were hollow. He was wearing the exact same gray sweatpants he had on the night Qley left him. The small apartment behind him was pitch dark, smelling strongly of stale takeout food and unwashed laundry. "Hey!" Matthew mumbled softly, shielding his bloodshot eyes from the bright hallway light. "What are you guys doing here so late? We need to talk to you," I said gently. Stepping inside and turning on a small lamp, we sat him down carefully on the worn couch. I didn't want to drag the conversation out. I didn't want to try and soften the blow, because softening the blow implies there is actually something soft to cushion the fall. I looked him dead in his tired eyes and told him everything. I told him about the sickening barbecue reveal. I told him about the disastrous formal dinner. I told him exactly what Qley confessed at the table. The long months of Julian's whispering, the fake, malicious rumors about him regretting the engagement, the treacherous involvement of Qley's best friend. I fully expected Matthew to scream at the top of his lungs. I expected him to grab his coffee table and throw it violently across the room in a fit of rage. I physically braced myself to have to hold him down while he raged against the injustice of it all. Instead, Matthew just sat perfectly, eerily still. He stared intensely at a blank spot on the painted wall for a full 2 minutes. The silence in the room was absolutely deafening. Finally, a small, humorless, broken smile crept slowly onto his pale face. It was the most heartbreaking, devastating expression I had ever seen on another human being. He let out a dry, hollow laugh that held no joy. "Of course," Matthew whispered. He didn't sound angry at all. He sounded utterly, completely defeated. "Of course he did that. That's Julian. He's always been a thief. Why would this be any different?" "Matt, you should be furiously angry right now," Wyatt said loudly, leaning forward and grabbing his knee. "He played her. He played you. He manipulated her mind for months until she didn't know up from down. Why wouldn't he?" Matthew asked, looking at Wyatt with completely dead, empty eyes. "Mom let him steal my hard-earned spot on the soccer team when we were kids. Dad let him steal my entire college fund without a word. Why wouldn't they let him steal my future wife? To them, I don't own anything. Everything I have in this life is just waiting quietly for Julian to decide if he wants to take it. Not this time, I said fiercely, grabbing Matthew's shoulder and squeezing tight. He doesn't get a free pass for this. We cut them off tonight. Mom, Dad, Julian. They are dead to us. We protect each other now. Matthew leaned heavily back against the couch cushions, closing his tired eyes. It doesn't matter anymore, Elijah. He won the game. He has her. He gets the wealthy father-in-law, the perfect corporate image. I have absolutely nothing left. Just let it go. I'm way too tired to fight him anymore. Seeing Matthew surrender so completely, so totally broken by years of emotional abuse, ignited a massive, burning fire inside me that nothing could extinguish. Julian had finally succeeded in breaking his little brother's spirit. But Julian had made a massive, fatal miscalculation. He arrogantly thought because Matthew wouldn't fight back, no one else would. He completely forgot about me. I realized later that night, as I drove home alone, that simply comforting Matthew wasn't nearly enough. Matthew desperately needed actual justice. If he was too broken to fight for himself, I would gladly become his weapon. I couldn't just walk up and punch Julian in the face. That would only get me arrested for assault and give my manipulative mother another perfect reason to play the weeping victim. No, I needed to completely destroy the one single thing Julian valued more than anything else in the world. His perfect, untouchable, wealthy image. The very next morning, I started making quiet phone calls. I work in high-level IT. I know exactly how to find digital information that people try desperately to hide. I started quietly, methodically looking into Julian's personal life. Qley had explicitly mentioned at dinner how Julian was providing a real future, which meant Julian was heavily leveraging his supposed corporate financial success to impress her and her very wealthy father, Mr. Harrison. But as I dug deeper into the public records and background checks over the next few days, the pieces didn't fit together at all. Julian had always loudly bragged about his massive six-figure salary and his brilliant stock investments. But I noticed something incredibly strange when I reviewed a detailed credit report I legally obtained through a private investigator contact. Julian's expensive, imported luxury SUV, it had been aggressively repossessed by the bank 2 months ago for non-payment. He was secretly driving a cheap rental car to family events and parking it 3 blocks down the street so nobody would see the generic license plates. His massive promotion at the elite finance firm? He hadn't worked there in over 6 months. He was quietly fired for severely violating company financial policy. Julian was completely, utterly broke. He was living a massive, desperate lie. But it got so much darker. I decided to stake out his upscale apartment complex a few nights later, just sitting quietly in my parked car across the dark street. I wanted to see his daily routine. On the second night of waiting, I saw something that made the blood run completely cold in my veins. Julian was walking quickly to the glass building entrance when a black sedan aggressively cut him off, jumping the concrete curb. A massive, terrifying-looking guy in a leather jacket stepped out of the driver's side. I rolled my car window down slightly to listen into the quiet night air. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but I saw Julian backing up quickly, his hands raised high in a defensive, terrified panic. The big guy suddenly lunged forward, grabbing Julian brutally by the throat, shoving him hard against the rough brick wall. Julian looked absolutely terrified, his face pale white. The guy said something low and threatening, tapped his heavy watch aggressively with his finger, and drove off, leaving Julian shaking uncontrollably on the dark sidewalk. That wasn't a friendly corporate colleague. That was a debt collector, a very violent, very dangerous one. The puzzle pieces snapped together in my mind with blinding, sickening clarity. Julian didn't steal Qley because he was deeply in love with her. He didn't steal her because he was intensely jealous of Matthew's happiness. Julian was drowning in massive debt, likely to some very dangerous people who were threatening his life. He needed an immediate, massive financial bailout. And Qley was the only daughter of a multimillionaire real estate mogul. Julian manipulated Qley, maliciously destroyed my brother's life, and gleefully tore our family apart, all to get his greedy hands on her family's money to save his own miserable skin. He was literally using her as a human shield against his violent creditors. I sat alone in my car in the dark, my heart pounding painfully against my ribs. The untouchable golden child wasn't just a master manipulator. He was a desperate, cornered rat fighting for survival. And I finally had the exact ammunition I needed to burn his fake, golden kingdom completely to the ground. I didn't know exactly when or how the massive explosion was going to happen, but I knew with absolute certainty that I held the match. At the time, I didn't know that this wasn't the worst thing he was about to do. Fan 5. Chow Treo Su that bung no 2 weeks passed since that disastrous family dinner. 2 weeks of absolute silence from my parents and my older brother. I spent my evenings helping Matthew completely reorganize his life, throwing out the last lingering reminders of Qley, and making sure he was eating. Wyatt came over almost every night, bringing takeout and terrible action movies to keep the mood light. We were building a new family, just the 3 of us, leaving the toxic wreckage behind. Then, on a cold Thursday night, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. It was 2:15 a.m. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and stared at the bright screen. It was an unknown number. Normally, I would just hit ignore and go back to sleep, but a strange, heavy gut feeling told me to pick it up. I swiped the green button and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said, my voice thick with sleep. For a long second, there was nothing but heavy, ragged breathing on the other end of the line. And then, a voice spoke. It was a voice I had known my entire life, but it sounded completely foreign. It lacked the signature arrogance, the polished smugness, the annoying superiority. It sounded absolutely terrified. "Elijah, please, don't hang up." It was Julian. I instantly sat up straight. The sleep vanishing from my system like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. "Julian? What do you want? How did you get this number?" I had blocked his actual cell phone right after the dinner. "I'm calling from a burner phone," Julian stammered, his words rushing out in a frantic, desperate blur. "Elijah, I need to see you. Right now. Please. It's an emergency. I have absolutely nobody else to call. Mom and Dad won't understand." I remembered the terrifying guy in the leather jacket outside his apartment, the violent shove against the brick wall, the absolute panic on my brother's face. The trap had finally sprung, and the golden child was caught right in the metal teeth. "I have nothing to say to you, Julian," I replied coldly, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "Call the police if you have an emergency." "No, no police," he practically screamed into the receiver. "Elijah, they will kill me. I am not exaggerating. They are going to kill me. Meet me at the depot. Please, just give me 10 minutes of your time. If you walk away after that, fine. But please come." The depot was an old, run-down diner on the edge of town where our dad used to take us for milkshakes when we were kids. It was neutral territory. I looked at the clock. It was completely insane to go. But I needed to hear the absolute truth from his own mouth. I needed the final piece of the puzzle. 20 minutes, I said flatly, and ended the call. I threw on a heavy jacket and drove through the empty, dark streets. The neon sign of the depot flickered aggressively in the night. The parking lot was completely deserted except for a beat-up silver sedan idling in the corner. Not a rented Porsche. Total junker. I walked inside. The smell of stale coffee and grease hit me instantly. I spotted Julian sitting in a booth in the farthest, darkest corner of the diner. When I slid into the vinyl seat across from him, I was genuinely shocked by his physical appearance. The flawless corporate hotshot was completely gone. Julian had dark, heavy bags under his bloodshot eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept or showered in a week. His hands were resting on the sticky table, and they were shaking violently. "You look like hell," I said bluntly, not offering a single ounce of sympathy. Julian let out a dry, cracked laugh. He ran his trembling hands through his greasy hair. "I messed up, Elijah. I messed up worse than you can possibly imagine. I am in so deep, I can't even see the light anymore. Yeah, I figured, I replied, crossing my arms over my chest and leaning back against the cold vinyl. I ran a background check on you last week. Your luxury SUV got repossessed. You got fired from the finance firm 6 months ago. And I saw your little physical altercation with that massive guy outside your apartment building. So cut the crap, Julian. Stop playing the successful older brother. Tell me the truth. Right now. Julian's eyes widened in genuine shock. He realized I already knew the foundation of his lie. The last wall of his massive ego completely crumbled right there in the diner booth. He dropped his head, staring down at the scratched table. I owe a lot of money, Julian confessed, his voice barely above a pathetic whisper. A very dangerous amount of money. I got involved with some aggressive private investors. Illegal bookies, Elijah. The guy you saw, his name is David. I owe his boss nearly $300,000. I made some terrible trades, tried to win it back, and lost everything. I lost my job because I tried to quietly borrow company funds to cover my tracks. They caught me. I avoided jail by signing away every asset I had left. But it wasn't enough to pay David. I stared at him, feeling a strange mix of absolute disgust and complete vindication. And Qley? Where does Matthew's fiancée fit into your pathetic gambling problem? Julian swallowed hard, looking up at me with terrified, pathetic eyes. I didn't plan it at first, but when Matthew brought her around, and I heard about Mr. Harrison's massive real estate empire, I realized she was sitting on a massive future inheritance. Her dad is worth tens of millions. I figured if I could get close to her, if I could make her fall in love with me, Mr. Harrison would eventually welcome me into the family business. He would give me a high-level executive job. Or, at the very least, he would quietly pay off my debts to save his precious daughter from a massive public scandal. I just needed to secure her. The sheer, calculated evil of his plan literally took my breath away. He didn't love Qley. He never cared about her happiness. And he certainly never cared about Matthew's devastating heartbreak. He systematically destroyed his own brother's future, brainwashed an innocent woman, and blew our entire family into a million pieces just to use Qley as a human ATM machine. You are a monster, I said, my voice dripping with pure venom. You manipulated her into leaving a man who truly loved her, just so you could steal her dad's money to pay off the mob. You used our little brother as collateral damage. I was desperate, Julian pleaded, reaching his shaking hands across the table toward me. I quickly pulled my arms back in disgust. You don't understand the pressure, Elijah. Mom and Dad expected me to be the golden boy forever. Couldn't fail. I couldn't let them see me lose. I had to maintain the image. If David doesn't get a massive payment by this Friday, he promised he would put me in a wheelchair permanently. I need cash, Elijah. Real cash. He looked at me with wild, desperate eyes. I know you and Wyatt have decent savings. You own your house. You could take out a second mortgage. You could lend me $100,000 just to keep David off my back until I secure a ring on Qley's finger and get Mr. Harrison to open his checkbook. Please, Elijah. You are my brother. Family protects family. You have to save me. I sat perfectly still, letting his pathetic, desperate words hang in the stale diner air. For my entire life, Julian had commanded the room. He had taken whatever he wanted and expected the rest of us to clean up the mess. And now, here he was, begging for his physical safety, asking me to ruin my own financial future to subsidize his greed. I looked deep inside myself, searching for even a tiny shred of brotherly love, an ounce of pity, or a flicker of familial duty. I found absolutely nothing, just a vast, cold emptiness. Family protects family, I repeated slowly, tasting the utter hypocrisy of his words. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, bringing my face just inches from his. You lost the right to use that word the day you lied to the soccer coach to steal Matthew's spot. You lost it when you drained our college funds. And you completely burned it to the ground the night you crawled into Qley's ear and convinced her to break Matthew's heart. You aren't my family, Julian. You are just a pathetic, broke con artist who finally ran out of victims. Julian's face went completely pale. "Elijah, please. I will die." "Then you better start running," I said coldly. I slid out of the diner booth and stood up, towering over his pathetic, hunched form. "Because I wouldn't give you a single red cent if you were actively on fire. Do not ever call my phone again. Do not ever come near me or Matthew. You made your bed with David. Now you get to lie in it." I turned my back on him and walked straight toward the diner exit. Julian called my name, his voice cracking loudly in panic, but I didn't stop. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the freezing night air. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment one below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I drove straight from the diner to Matthew's apartment. It was nearly 4 in the morning, but I didn't care. I pounded on his door until he finally answered, looking groggy and confused. Wyatt, who had crashed on Matthew's air mattress, stumbled out of the living room rubbing his eyes. "Get a pot of coffee going," I told them, walking past them into the small kitchen. "We need to have a serious family meeting right now." We sat around Matthew's tiny kitchen table as the sun slowly started to rise, painting the sky in pale shades of orange and gray. I told them absolutely everything. I recounted every single pathetic detail of my conversation with Julian. The massive gambling debt, the terrifying mobsters, the lost corporate job, the repossessed luxury cars, and the incredibly dark truth about why he actually pursued Qley. Wyatt's jaw practically hit the floor. He sat back in his wooden chair, staring at the ceiling in total disbelief. "He used her," Wyatt muttered. "He literally orchestrated a hostile takeover of a human being just to get to her father's bank account. That is genuinely psychotic." I turned my attention to Matthew. I expected him to be crushed all over again. I expected the pain of the betrayal to double. But as I watched my younger brother's face, I saw something entirely different. The heavy, dark cloud that had been hovering over his head for weeks suddenly lifted. His shoulders relaxed. The color slowly returned to his pale cheeks. Matthew let out a long, heavy exhale, running his hands over his face. "It wasn't me," he whispered quietly. He looked up at Wyatt and me, and for the first time in a month, his eyes were clear. "Elijah, it wasn't about me not being good enough. It wasn't because I didn't make enough money, or because I wasn't exciting enough. It was never about love. It was just a brutal financial transaction to him." "Exactly," I affirmed, slapping my hand on the table. "You dodged a massive, lethal bullet, Matt. Qley showed her true colors by letting Julian manipulate her so easily, and Julian showed the world exactly who he is. You are free. We need to lock everything down," Wyatt said sharply, his practical construction manager brain kicking into high gear. "Julian is desperate. Desperate people do incredibly stupid things. We need to completely cut him off from everything." We didn't waste a single hour. By 9 o'clock that morning, I drove Matthew directly to the downtown office of a brilliant financial lawyer named Ryan. Ryan was a no-nonsense professional. We explained the chaotic situation and the immediate threat of Julian's debts. Lawyer Ryan moved aggressively. He immediately drafted the necessary legal paperwork to completely freeze and sever any old, lingering joint bank accounts from our childhood that Julian might try to access. He put hard credit freezes on Matthew's social security number and Wyatt's accounts to ensure Julian couldn't fraudulently open credit cards in our names to pay off his bookies. We built an impenetrable financial fortress around ourselves. While we were sitting securely in the lawyer's polished office, my cell phone started blowing up. The screen lit up over and over again. It was my mother. When I didn't answer the first 5 calls, the frantic text messages started pouring in. "Elijah, answer your phone right now. Julian just called me in tears. He told me what you said to him at the diner. How can you be so incredibly cruel and heartless? Your own brother is in terrible trouble and you refuse to help him? We are a family. You have savings. Elijah, he could be seriously hurt. You need to go to the bank and wire him the money immediately. Do not be selfish. I read the text messages out loud to Wyatt and Matthew. The absolute, staggering delusion of our mother was truly a sight to behold. She completely ignored the fact that Julian had systematically destroyed Matthew's life. She ignored the lies, the manipulation, and the pure evil intent. All she cared about was saving her precious golden child from facing the very real consequences of his own disastrous actions. Then my phone rang again. This time it was my father, Arthur. I finally answered, putting it on speakerphone so my brothers could hear. Elijah, my father said, his voice heavy and strained. Please, you need to listen to reason. Your mother is having a complete nervous breakdown in the living room. Julian is in serious danger. We need to pool our resources. I know you and Wyatt are angry about the Qley situation, but you need to be the bigger person here. One simple bank transfer can fix all of this. Dad, I said calmly, my voice steady and cold. Listen to me very carefully. Julian is a grown man. He made his choices. He stole his brother's fiancée to pay off a gambling debt. I will not give him a single dime. And if you and Mom give him money, you are just throwing cash into a burning fire. He will never change. He is your flesh and blood. My father yelled defensively, the coward finally showing some misplaced anger. Not anymore, I replied. Do not call this number again. I hung up the phone. Right there in the lawyer's office, I went into my phone settings. I blocked my father's number. I blocked my mother's number. Wyatt and Matthew pulled out their phones and did the exact same thing. We severed the gangrenous limb to save the rest of the body. We found out a few weeks later through a distant aunt that my parents actually did the unthinkable. Desperate to save Julian from the violent debt collectors, Eleanor and Arthur went to the bank and took out a massive, crippling second mortgage on their family home. They drained their retirement accounts. They handed over hundreds of thousands of dollars to clear Julian's name with the mobsters. They sacrificed their entire financial future, their golden years, to bail out the monster they created. They thought their massive sacrifice would finally make Julian settle down. They thought it would fix him. They were spectacularly wrong. 6 months is a long time in the real world. It is plenty of time for the dust to settle, for the heavy smoke to clear, and for karma to finally arrive and collect her absolute due. The spectacular downfall of Julian was incredibly swift and absolutely merciless. Once Julian's debts were paid off by our foolish parents, he thought he was completely in the clear. He continued parading Qley around, aggressively pushing for a quick courthouse wedding so he could finally secure his legal ties to Mr. Harrison's massive fortune. But Julian fundamentally underestimated the people he was dealing with. Mr. Harrison did not build a multimillion-dollar real estate empire by being a stupid man. He was highly suspicious of the sudden breakup, and he absolutely despised the arrogant way Julian carried himself. Mr. Harrison quietly hired a team of private, high-end corporate investigators to thoroughly look into Julian's background before he allowed his daughter to marry him. The investigators uncovered absolutely everything. They found the sealed records of his firing from the finance firm for gross embezzlement. They traced the massive cash payments my parents made to the illegal bookies. They documented his completely ruined credit score and the repossessed luxury vehicles. Mr. Harrison did not confront Julian privately. He orchestrated a masterclass in humiliation. He invited Julian and Qley to a very fancy, incredibly public dinner at an exclusive country club downtown. Right in the middle of the crowded dining room, Mr. Harrison dropped a thick manila folder onto Julian's expensive steak plate. He loudly, aggressively exposed every single lie Julian had told. He laid out the crushing debt, the corporate firing, and the sickening reality that Julian was only dating Qley for a massive financial bailout. Qley was absolutely devastated. The incredibly fragile illusion Julian had built around her shattered into a million sharp pieces. She realized she had thrown away a genuinely good, loving man for a broke, manipulative con artist who viewed her purely as a dollar sign. She stood up from the country club table, threw her glass of expensive wine directly into Julian's shocked face, and walked out with her father. Mr. Harrison wasn't done. He used his massive corporate influence in the city to ensure Julian was completely blacklisted from the entire financial sector. No reputable firm would even grant Julian an interview. Faced with complete public humiliation, zero income, and the burning shame of his exposed lies, Julian completely abandoned ship. He packed a single suitcase and fled the state in the middle of the night, leaving no forwarding address. He didn't even say goodbye to the parents who had literally bankrupted themselves to save his life. Qley tried to come crawling back. About 4 months after the country club incident, Matthew received a thick, tear-stained apology letter in his mailbox. Qley wrote pages upon pages about how deeply manipulated she was, how incredibly sorry she felt, and how she desperately wanted to meet for coffee to explain everything and beg for his forgiveness. I watched Matthew carefully read the letter standing in his kitchen. He didn't cry. He didn't look conflicted. He calmly folded the expensive stationery in half, walked over to the garbage can, and threw it right in the trash. He never replied. He respected himself way too much to ever let her back in. But the most tragic, pathetic victims of Julian's hurricane were my parents. By mortgaging the house and draining their retirement funds, they completely destroyed their own lives. Without Julian's fake corporate success to brag about, and without Wyatt, Matthew, and me to act as their emotional punching bags, their toxic marriage completely fractured. They couldn't afford the massive new mortgage payments on the family home. The bank formally foreclosed on the house we grew up in. They were violently forced to pack up 30 years of memories and move into a small, incredibly cramped, run-down apartment on the bad side of town. I actually saw my mother, Eleanor, once during this time. I was walking down the aisle of a local grocery store, pushing my cart, when I turned the corner and almost bumped right into her. She looked terrible. She had aged 10 years in just 6 months. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced by worn-out sweaters. The arrogant, untouchable matriarch was completely broken. When she saw me, her tired eyes lit up with a desperate, pathetic hope. She took a step toward me, reaching her trembling hand out to touch my arm. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice cracking with raw emotion. "Oh, Elijah, it's so incredibly good to see you. Please, I miss my boys, your father and I. Things are so incredibly hard right now. Julian won't return our calls. We have absolutely nothing left. Please, let's just sit down and talk." I looked down at the woman who gave birth to me, the woman who watched my brother's heart break and poured lemonade for his abuser, the woman who called me cruel for refusing to fund a criminal. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just total, peaceful indifference. I didn't say a single word. I didn't acknowledge her existence. I simply gripped the handle of my shopping cart, stepped smoothly around her, and walked away down the aisle, leaving her standing entirely alone in the cold supermarket. Meanwhile, our true family was absolutely thriving. Free from the constant, crushing weight of our parents' toxic expectations and Julian's malicious sabotage, Matthew flourished. He poured all of his energy into his landscape architecture career. He secured several massive city contracts and received a huge promotion and a massive salary increase. He bought his own house, a beautiful, quiet place with a massive backyard. Even better, he met a wonderful woman named Sarah at a community garden project. She was kind, grounded, and treated Matthew with the absolute respect and pure love he always deserved. Wyatt started his own independent contracting business and was booked solid for months. And me? I finally found total peace. We decided to host a massive barbecue at Matthew's new house to celebrate his promotion. The summer air was warm and clear. The smell of charcoal and roasting meat drifted over the green lawn. But this time, it didn't make me nauseous. It smelled like pure victory. Wyatt was standing by the grill, aggressively flipping burgers and laughing loudly at a terrible joke Sarah had just told. Matthew was sitting in a lawn chair, holding a cold beer, a bright, genuine smile lighting up his entire face, as he watched his friends and his new girlfriend interact. There was no tension. There were no hidden agendas, no toxic jealousy, and no manipulative games. It was just simple, pure happiness. I stood by the fence, watching my younger brothers thrive, and I realized something profoundly important. For my entire life, society had shoved the idea down my throat that blood is thicker than water, that family is everything, that you must always forgive your parents and siblings, no matter how terribly they treat you, simply because you share the same DNA. But that is a dangerous, toxic lie. Blood does not automatically make you a family. Blood makes you relatives. True family is built on a foundation of mutual respect, absolute loyalty, and genuine care. True family are the people who stand right beside you when your entire world is falling apart, not the people who secretly hand the sledgehammer to the person breaking it. Julian, Eleanor, and Arthur were my relatives. But Wyatt and Matthew? They are my family. Cutting off toxic parents and abusive siblings isn't a sign of weakness. Doesn't mean you failed. It is one of the most incredibly brave, difficult things a human being can do. It requires looking at the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally and finally accepting that they are completely incapable of doing so. It hurts like hell at first. Feels like you are walking through fire. But once you finally step out of those flames, once you establish your hard boundaries and refuse to be their victim anymore, the freedom you feel is absolutely intoxicating. You don't owe your abusers your presence, your money, or your forgiveness just because they share your last name. You owe yourself peace. And sometimes, the only way to find that peace is to completely walk away and never look back. Matthew clinked his glass against mine, snapping me out of my deep thoughts. To the good life, he smiled, his eyes bright and clear. To the good life, I echoed, taking a long drink. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a heavy one, full of dark turns and painful realizations, but I truly hope this resonated with you in some way. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, having to make the incredibly painful choice to walk away from toxic family members to save yourself? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Now, I have a special request just for the amazing people who stayed with me until the very end. If you are hearing my voice right now, I want you to go down to the comments and simply type the letter W. The W stands for winner. It's a secret badge of honor, a sign for the 1% Club, the incredibly resilient, strong people who made it to the finish line of this video. It lets me know you are part of this amazing community. Please don't forget to hit that like button if you found value in this story, and make sure to follow the channel so we can continue to navigate this crazy, unpredictable journey of life together in the next video. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you all next time.